grey is more not a typical product of Asperger's thinking, but maybe a reasonably good example. My name's Jon Adams. I'm artist in resident here at the Autism Research Centre in Cambridge. I'm an artist, but I'm also a person with Asperger's. When I first came here, I had a long conversation with Simon and we spoke about how we could work together. You know, I learned a lot about my Asperger's that day. And it was really to look at systemizing. Systemizing was new. Never heard it before, never realised what it was, never realised how it really fitted in with what I do, both as a person with Asperger's and my artwork too.
There's a lot to learn from each other about what the research is doing to try and understand the autistic mind, but equally someone with autism giving us first-hand sort of description. I suppose not just about how the mind works, but also the products of the mind which comes out in art.
The synthesizer was purely there to experiment with sounds. Now I needed clues to find those sounds, and I also needed clues to work out the notes that I was going to play. And while I was here talking to a few people, I noticed patterns in some of the words. A lot of the words used were 8 letters long. Oxytocin, Asperger, you know, things like that. I almost sat down and worked out a code, a key, turning note values 12 notes. I decided to work with 8 notes, not 12, and assign a note value to each of the letters, but I did it in such a way that it wasn't obvious. Even as a dyslexic, words have been really important to me throughout the project. I thought, how can I get the sound and the notes mixed together without me doing an interpretation by just playing the notes I wanted to play? So I came up with the idea of using 12-tone note-finding grids, but not basing them on a little melody that I made on the keyboard, but taking words, 8-letter words, and converting them into 8-letter sequences of notes. Yeah. 1, 8. The matrices are really important because they give you the variations for each word. It's not just a set code for each letter. I wanted to make it far more musical than that, using composition techniques. And this was also mixed up with observations from tiles in the room that I stayed in at Cambridge, and I gave each of the 3 rows of tiles a numerical value due to the darkness of its colour, and that also formed sequences of letters and then sequences of numbers, which gave me notes.
Before we met Jon, we already had some research looking at perception, and particularly at attention to detail, because people with autism seem to have a preference for detail over the bigger picture, and they seem to show talent in detecting small details that other people might miss. And I guess that working with Jon really helped us to see how this comes out in one particular person, because otherwise, as psychologists or neuroscientists, we tend to just apply standardized tests, which we have to apply to a whole group of people, but it misses some of the richness of individual experience.
Some of the bits in grey in the visuals, looking at close-ups and details, and the tide and the stones and the natural things, and the pace. I just think they express something that I can't say in words about what it's like to see the world with Asperger's. You know, not only do I look at the world through rose-tinted glasses because of my dyslexia, but I look at it with the filter of Asperger's too. You know, everything around me has patterns. You know, everything here, the pattern over there, the pattern in the grass as the sun shines, they're all huge distractions. You can't switch it off. It's more of a desire, it's more of a natural feeling. I've always grown up with it. To me, it's perfectly natural to see or hear. My mum used to have to chase the lions out of my room when I was a child, because I would see them, you know, in the patterns on the wallpaper. Or so there is, you know, a little bit of a negative side when you're a child, and it can be, if you don't understand it and you've not been told about it, it can be quite confusing. Working with Lucas, at the very beginning, I was making some sound for him to make a music video for his degree. And the relationship has kind of developed further from there and ended up as a couple of films.
During my final year at university, Jon asked me if I wanted to make a video for audio he was working on. And I didn't have a lot of input, but other than that he was using the sound of an MRI machine. And he was working together with the Autism Research Centre.
As a person with Asperger's, it's hard to give something over, but one of the rules I made was I'd like to see what Lucas makes of it from listening to the sound, see what images he gets in almost a synesthetic way. And I gave him complete freedom to you know, work the images out for himself, and what he came up with was great, black and white. And so that was really quite good. The way it organically developed from something quite small at the start to quite a collaborative partnership in both respects of making the videos and also the way they were shown, showing them as projections onto the backs of the synthesizers as separate parcels of images, which Lucas devised a system how to do that without light spill. So the two complemented each other and played off each other all the way through. It wasn't just commissioning one, it was working together, bouncing ideas off. In a sense, when we came to be doing grade 2, I took a lead from what he had made with the very hard computer parts and components, almost looking organic. I decided to make some organic videos and look at close-up parts at the orchard at the ARC. So, imitating some of the movement that Lucas had put into his video, I filmed some of the trees, but then I also added some film work I'd done down in Cornwall. As a person with Asperger's, I love beaches, I love rocks, I love seeing the tide come in, and there's lots of analogies there with, you know, music and repetitiveness, but everything being different. You know, each different wave is slightly different from the one before, even though it has a pattern. And also with the working in the forest with the trees, there was an analogy there also about can't see the wood from the trees, traditional Asperger's versus you know, seeing the bigger picture.
As an experience of watching the film, I think it's it's actually very tranquil, it's very peaceful. And what it felt like is that you were looking through the eyes of someone with autism at what is catching their attention. And often it's moving water, close-up detail of rocks or sand or trees or stone, but you know, really where you see the texture, the detail.
So I think that metaphor that occurs within Gray and the visuals is really nice, and the sound too. The sound where it's made from a metamorphosed MRI scan noise. You know, I've taken noise, turned it into thousands of small pieces and reassembled it. I had absolutely no idea about MRI before I came, and it was either the first or the second visit I found out about it, listened to it and thought that's what I'm going to use as the input for the music. And it kind of tasted right. It felt right. I tend to do a lot of stuff by instinct. I've learnt both about Asperger's as being a gift and a disability. There are certain things I cannot do, and that you know, mainly I'm disabled by society. You know, I've never found it easy to be in the presence of people, and the world runs on, you know, interactions with other people. You can't become a hermit, especially not now. So there are disabling sides to having Asperger's, and sometimes for fleeting moments, and they are very fleeting moments, I do despair that, you know, I find interaction with people so hard, but it's not from my side, it's probably from theirs. And I do get very disappointed with people, and that really hurts. People say, you know, having Asperger's you don't have any empathy and you don't feel. But that's not true. You feel very deeply, and you do recognise that sometimes you really don't fit in, and that can be a very hard cross to bear. But then that's totally eclipsed by, you know, I do things very differently. I see patterns in everything. It really helps me make the work I do, and I wouldn't trade that in for anything. So for me it's a gift, it's a talent, and sometimes that's very hard to get across to people. You know, people only see Asperger's or autism as a very negative thing, and the more that this work can do to accidentally, let's say, change people's opinion, and it has done, certainly has done on Twitter, certainly has done on Facebook, just by talking about what I'm doing. You know, rather than, you don't change people's minds by telling them they have to. You change people's minds by example. You know, there are a lot of kids growing up with Asperger's now, and maybe if parents understand their children a bit better through the way they've seen me do the project or what I've written in the blog, then that has to be great.